The crisp November air of Oak Haven, California, was filled with the sounds of patriotism. A high school marching band played a slightly off-key but enthusiastic rendition of a John Philip Sousa march, while the cheerful chatter of families lined the sidewalks of Main Street. Small American flags fluttered from every lamppost, and the smell of popcorn and grilled hot dogs mingled with the scent of autumn leaves. It was Veterans Day, a sacred tradition in a town that had sent its sons and daughters to every major conflict for the last century. Tucked away from the main crowd, seated on a simple worn folding chair near a large oak tree, sat an old man. He was alone. His tweed jacket was frayed at the cuffs, and his worn corduroy trousers had seen better decades. A simple wooden cane rested against his leg, though his hands, weathered and knotted, lay still in his lap. His face, a road map of deep lines etched by time and sun, was partially obscured by the brim of a plain, faded baseball cap. To the few who glanced his way, he was just another anonymous face in the crowd, a lonely veteran perhaps, lost in memories of a bygone era. Before the parade truly began, if you believe that true respect is measured not in loud applause but in quiet, unwavering dignity, then please hit the like button and subscribe. It helps us ensure that stories of real honor aren't forgotten. Now, let's return to Oak Haven, where the day was about to become unforgettable. A young, ambitious local news reporter named Chloe Vance, eager to capture the heartbeat of the community, was scanning the crowd with her cameraman, Mark. Her eyes, sharp and searching for a compelling visual, landed on the old man under the tree. "Mark, get a shot of him," she whispered, tilting her head toward the solitary figure. "The one sitting alone. Perfect B-roll. Gives us that touch of pathos, you know? The forgotten hero narrative. It'll play great." Mark swung the heavy camera around, zooming in. "Got it. Looks pretty frail. Think he wants to talk?" Chloe scoffed lightly, her focus already shifting to the approaching float carrying the town's mayor. "Doubtful. Probably just wants to be left alone. We'll use the visual and move on. The real story is the mayor's speech." The old man seemed oblivious to the camera, his gaze fixed on the parade. He watched as the junior ROTC cadets marched past, their uniforms crisp, their faces a mixture of teenage awkwardness and solemn pride. He offered a slow, almost imperceptible nod as they passed. He watched the local veterans from the VFW post, some walking, others in wheelchairs, their waves to the crowd a little weaker than the year before. He didn't clap or cheer. He simply watched, his presence a silent, steady monument of observation. The announcer, a cheerful man from the local radio station, called out the names of dignitaries from a makeshift podium. "A big Oak Haven welcome for Mayor Thompson, and give it up for our city council members." Each announcement was met with polite applause. The camera followed Chloe as she intercepted the mayor for a quick soundbite, her back turned to the old man under the tree. He was now just a blurry figure in the background of her shot, exactly as she intended. As the last of the floats rumbled by, the announcer's voice turned somber. The cheerful music faded, replaced by a respectful hush that fell over the crowd. "And now," the announcer's voice echoed down Main Street, "we ask you to join us in a moment of silence for those who made the ultimate sacrifice, for those who never returned home. Please rise for the presentation of the colors and the playing of taps." The crowd stirred, a wave of motion as hundreds of people rose to their feet, hats coming off, hands placed over hearts. Chloe and Mark stood ready, the camera pointed toward the color guard now marching to the center of the street. It was the emotional peak of the event, the final, powerful shot she needed for her segment. But then, Mark's voice crackled through her earpiece. "Chloe, look." She turned. Under the oak tree, the solitary old man was moving. He gripped his wooden cane, his knuckles white with effort. With a slow, deliberate strain that seemed to take all his strength, he began to push himself up from his chair. His body was stiff, his movements labored. Chloe rolled her eyes, whispering to Mark, "He's probably just trying to get a better look. Keep the camera on the flag." But the old man wasn't looking for a better view. Once he was finally standing, unsteady but resolute, he let go of his cane. It clattered softly onto the grass, unnoticed. And then he did something else. Something that made the reporter's breath catch in her throat. Something that was just the beginning. Slowly, the old man's right hand began to rise. It wasn't the shaky, uncertain motion of a man his age. It was a movement filled with a deep, ingrained memory. His back, which had been stooped with age, straightened with an invisible command. The frailness that Chloe had perceived seemed to evaporate, replaced by a ramrod-straight posture that defied his years. His hand, palm down, fingers extended and joined, met the brim of his faded cap in a slow, perfect military salute. But he wasn't looking at the flag. His gaze, sharp and piercing, looked past the color guard, past the mayor, down the long, empty stretch of Main Street. It was a look that wasn't seeing the pavement and the lampposts of Oakhaven. It was a look that saw something else entirely. A dusty field, a distant shore, or perhaps a line of unseen ghosts standing at attention. He was saluting not a symbol, but a memory. In Chloe's earpiece, her cameraman's voice was a choked whisper. "Chloe. Oh my God, look at his form. That's not just some old guy." Chloe's breath hitched. She saw it now. The crisp angle of his elbow. The unwavering stillness of his hand. The fierce, profound focus in his eyes. This was not the gesture of a man seeking attention. It was a private, sacred rite being performed in public. "Forget the flag, Mark," she commanded, her own voice barely audible. "Forget the mayor. Get on him. Zoom in. Stay on his face." The camera swung, the lens tightening on the old man's weathered profile. A few people in the crowd nearby noticed the shift. A woman who had been shushing her child turned her head and her eyes widened. A man standing next to her lowered the phone he'd been using to record the flag. "Look at that man's salute," the woman whispered to her husband. Her husband squinted, his expression changing from passive respect to dawning recognition. "Wait a minute. That's not just a man. That's—" The name, a quiet thunderclap, rippled through the front of the crowd. "It's Clint Eastwood." The whisper spread like fire through dry grass. Heads turned. A low murmur swept through the silent assembly, a wave of shock and disbelief. Phones were raised again, but this time not to record the parade. They were raised to capture the impossible, humbling sight of a living legend, standing completely alone, offering a salute of such raw, unvarnished sincerity that it made every other gesture in the square feel hollow. The mayor, hand over his heart, faltered. He glanced over, and his jaw went slack. The city council members lowered their gazes, suddenly self-conscious. Chloe watched, mesmerized, as an old veteran in a wheelchair, a man who hadn't stood in 40 years, slowly, painfully, lifted a trembling, spotted hand to his own forehead, his eyes welling with tears as he returned the salute to the figure standing under the tree. The final, mournful notes of taps echoed through the stillness, each note hanging in the cool November air like a teardrop. Mr. Eastwood held his salute, motionless, a statue carved from honor and memory. The last note faded into absolute silence. He stood for one beat longer, then another, before his hand returned to his side with the same slow, deliberate grace. The crowd didn't clap. They didn't cheer. To do so would have shattered the sanctity of the moment. Instead, a collective breath was released. A few quiet sobs broke the silence. People looked at one another, then back at him, their faces a mixture of awe and shame for not having noticed him sooner. Chloe Vance stood frozen, her expensive microphone hanging limply in her hand. The shallow, cynical story she had planned, the story about pathos and a forgotten hero, had just been handed to her. But it was deeper, more powerful, and more humbling than she could have ever imagined. She hadn't just found a story, she was a part of it. And in that moment, she felt incredibly small. As the last echo of taps dissolved into the California air, the spell remained unbroken. The crowd stood in a profound, reverent silence, their eyes fixed on the man who had, in a single gesture, reminded them of the day's true meaning. Clint Eastwood slowly lowered himself back into his folding chair, the ramrod straightness of the soldier giving way once more to the quiet posture of the old man. He picked up his wooden cane, rested it against his leg, and resumed his watch as if nothing had happened. He offered no nod to the crowd, no acknowledgement of their stares. His tribute was over. It had never been for them. The parade announcer, his voice thick with emotion, struggled for a moment before simply saying, "Thank you for joining us. God bless our veterans, and God bless America." People began to disperse, but the usual post-parade buzz was gone. Families walked away more quietly, their conversations hushed. Parents held their children's hands a little tighter. Several people walked past the oak tree, keeping a respectful distance, their glances a mixture of awe and gratitude. They didn't approach him for an autograph or a photo. They instinctively understood that to do so would be to profane the moment. They left him as they had found him, alone. Chloe Vance stood frozen, the weight of her microphone a heavy burden. Mark, her cameraman, lowered his camera, his own expression sober. "Did you get that?" Chloe asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Every second," Mark confirmed. "What are we going to do with it? The mayor's office is going to be expecting their segment to lead the 6 o'clock news." Chloe shook her head, a new firm resolve in her eyes. Kill the mayor segment. Erase it. This is the only story. This is the entire story. She didn't try to interview Mr. Eastwood. She knew now that the power of his action was in its silence. Her job wasn't to ask him to explain it. It was to try and understand it. That evening, the Oak Haven local news began not with politicians or marching bands, but with a long, tight shot of a weathered face, a faded cap, and a perfect salute. Chloe's voiceover was stripped of its usual slick, journalistic polish. It was simple, direct, and deeply personal. "We come to these events to honor heroes," she began, as the footage played. "We look for them on floats and podiums. Today, I was reminded that true honor isn't always on display. It can be found sitting quietly under a tree, anonymous and unassuming. She went on to describe the scene, admitting her own initial cynicism. I saw him as a visual, a piece of a story about loneliness. I was wrong. He wasn't forgotten. He was remembering. The story went viral overnight. But for once, the comments weren't about celebrity. They were about character. I'm a veteran. That salute brought tears to my eyes. One user wrote. Another said, he didn't have to be there. He chose to be. That's everything. The focus wasn't that a star had been spotted, but that a man had shown what true respect looked like. And so, the story of Clint Eastwood at the parade serves as a quiet reminder. In a world that is always shouting, he chose to be still. In a world that clamors for attention, he chose to give respect. He proved that you don't need a speech to make a statement, and you don't need a spotlight to demonstrate honor. Sometimes all you need is to show up, stand tall, and remember. If this story reminded you of what truly matters, share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe so together we can continue to share stories that celebrate the quiet dignity that holds our world together. We'll see you on the next journey.